All right. So getting some materials. Let's keep going. Let's say some block. Let's add glass to this. This being some sort of a cup or glass. Let's go to our glass category in the material browser. And the first series of glass is more for commercial application and buildings, curtain wall application. We're going to go past that till we get to these little globes. And let's say we'll add, I think there's a bluish one. Did I pass that? Yeah. Let's say we'll add this clear blue to that drinking glass. Now, sometimes, especially if it's smaller, when you go to drag and drop, you might miss. If you let go of your mouse and you get the table, then the table becomes glass. So I want to show you another way of doing that. You're going to select the object first, and then come in, and if you right-click on the word glass, clear glass, you can then select assign to selection, and that's a little safer, right? You're not going to miss if your cursor is a little jumpy on you. All right, and then we're going to add a metallic, let's say a polished chrome to this metal object here. So that's going to be in metal. So if you click the word metal in your library list, and I'm going to scroll down until I see a real chromy looking polished. We could go brass if that'd be one heavy expensive piece. Here we go, chrome polished. So I'm going to drag and drop this from here, and I'm going to drop it right onto my object. Now, it turns black, and I'll explain that in a second. Let's one more time, let's say that this is, I don't know what it is, let's say, it could represent a book, but I want to show you another material that's kind of neat. It's in the plastic category, so select plastic, and there's this coarse texture. It's like an orange peel finish. We may not be able to see that because the book's far away, but we'll zoom in and do a render. So drag that and drop that on this rectangular surface here. And now let's see how we stand here with another render. And the first thing that should catch your eye is that metallic object that should be chrome, polished chrome, and that looks anything like you might have thought it should look. Now, think about what's happening there. The top looks like somebody spray painted it black. What does chrome do? What makes polished chrome look the way it does is it reflects everything around it. What's around it? There's no ceiling, there's no front walls, and you're looking into the abyss. It's like going out into space and expecting that to have a nice, shiny, polished look. If we had a white ceiling, that would give a whole different look. You'd still see some black because it's reflecting off the non-wall, so to speak. So if you have anything shiny like that, it's vital that you enclose the room so that you get a realistic look. Okay, so I wanted you to see that and what happened. The glass, that looks pretty good. It might look a little strange on the bottom. What you're seeing is the shadow, because this is a tapered glass. So you're seeing the shadow of the top cast down from the point light, and you see a little bit of the southwest spot going off in this direction. And we don't see the southeast one for the glass, but we do see it a little bit for this metal object. All right, let's add a floor. Okay, so let's close out our render window. And for the floor, let's go back up to flooring. And see, for flooring, I want tile. And in tile, I'm looking for terracotta. There it is. Now, this is going to be a little bit shocking here, but select terracotta, drag and drop that onto the floor. And I'm going to collapse my materials palette. And it looks pretty dull, right? So let's now do another render. And what happens, and I don't know why they did what they did here, but this is so highly polished that you are seeing a reflection of the tabletop, right? And you can't even see almost where the wall ends and the floor starts, except for the grout lines of the terracotta. And here's the burn mark reflection of our spotlight. I wanted you to see that because it's cool, but it's not what we would want in the end. The reason I'm showing you this is because in the default terracotta floor material, it has way too high of a reflection and refraction going on. Refraction is when you look through a glass that's distorted on the other end there. And what we're going to do is tone that down and get a much better look on the floor. Okay? I'm going to close this out. And let's go to our material browser. Now, since I'm making an adjustment on this material, I am not going to do that here because think of this as it's out on the computer, and I want to affect the one that I brought into my drawing, like the loaded line type. So now I'm going to go to my upper list. Now I'm going to just stretch this down a little bit so I can see more, and I'm looking for the terracotta. It should be at the bottom. Yeah, there we go. Now, what you need to do is double click on that image in your document material section. So double click on terracotta, and that's going to open up our next palette called the materials editor. And remember I said there's 3 palettes. There's one yet that we haven't seen. And all of these things here, these are called attributes. And depends on the material that you choose from here, you'll get a different set of attributes, right? Now, in here, we've got reflectivity and we've got glossiness. We definitely don't want as much of either. Now, click on this little black triangle and you'll see that there is settings in here. So what we're going to first do is tone down the glossiness. Let's go about half of this. I'm going to go to about 50% and then do a render and see where that stands. Okay, so I'm going to select render. Okay, so the glossiness gives you a sharp reflection. So all this did is it widened out the reflection so that more crisp light is now spread out. So did I make an improvement? No. Maybe a little bit. I can clearly see where the floor meets the walls, but not liking it. So what we're going to do, and this is the art of trial and error, is we're going to go to this direct option and I'm going to cut that in half. I'm going to go to 33. And then do another render. Okay, now the floor is brightening up a bit. The grout lines are brightening up, but the glossiness is still not liking it. So I'm going to lower the 2 settings again. I'm going to cut direct in half. Notice it takes a little longer to render with all these added material. What will slow down the render process the most is lots of reflection, right? So the polished brass, shadows, right? So the more materials you add with those features, the longer it's going to take to render. All right, I'm going to cut the direct down, let's say to about 15. And I'm going to cut the glossiness down, let's say we're at 51, let's say 25-ish. Oh. All right, and then let's do another render and see, are we going in the right direction? Better. Scene itself is looking dark, and I'm telling you, a big part of that is because we don't have the other walls and ceiling to help trap in the light and bounce it around some more. So if we were insistent on keeping this, I would go to that exposure control and I would nudge it down a little bit. But here's what I want to do. Let's close out your render window and we'll do one change that will help. And I'm going to minimize my browser and I'm going to zoom out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy my floor plane up to my ceiling plane. So with a copy, I'm basically going to snap to this inside corner here and snap to this inside corner here. If it helps you see it any better, go to orbit, right? That's definitely a better angle to do that. And I'm going to say copy, good old AutoCAD copy, so I have to go to the Home tab. And select copy, pick on the floor plane, press enter, snap to that inside corner here, snap to that corner there. Now, I don't want terracotta on my ceiling, so what we're going to do is add a white paint material for the ceiling, so that will help reflect a lot of light downward. Okay, so I'm going to go to the paint, and select paint, and I'm going to scroll down on my list, and here's white. So I'm going to play it safe and select my plane, and I'm going to right click on white in the materials and say assign to selection. Now I see a little bit of something popping up. Remember when we put the light bulb in, I said 7'10", and if we make a ceiling, it might still be up too high. I'm going to go to front view here in wireframe, and I think I'm dangerously close to the ceiling. So I'm going to go back to top view, click the light, and we're at 7'10". I'm going to make it 7 feet 9. Okay? I don't want to lose any light through the ceiling if the light bulb's popping above it. Okay. All right. Now let's go back to the camera view, and let's do a render, and let's see. So I have to go back to visualize and then render. And it should be brighter. Not remarkably brighter. So I wanted to do that first, and then we're going to go with the exposure control a bit more. And then the other thing we have is the lights have intensities. We could, it's like changing a 60-watt bulb with a 100-watt bulb. We could click on the light and in the properties up the intensity. The default will be 1. We try 1 1/4, 1 1/2. But I think we're going to just lower the environment, the exposure a little bit. So we're at 8. Now here's the exposure palette. If you close this palette, remember, you pick on the word render and it's right here. Okay? You have that out. I'm going to make the 8 7.5. And you'll see the scene itself lighten up when you're in realistic. Okay, so 7.5. Let's do another render. Make sure you're in camera 1. And render. And you can see the tabletop brightens up. So my tabletop may be a little too bright, but that's a lot of that is the point light responsibility. So we could lower the intensity slightly, or if we're okay with it, then that's fine as well. But now you could see the terracotta floor looks more like a terracotta floor that I've ever seen anyway, where it doesn't have much, if any, shine. And if you wanted a little more shine, you could go right back into the material editor and up these values a bit. Okay, so that's the fun of this. You become like an electronic chemist and working all these values. Sometimes when you click off of the image window, it disappears, but it's still there. In other words, if you go down to your taskbar and you see the A in AutoCAD and you rest your mouse, don't click, rest your mouse on it. You can go over and click that to get it showing again without having to re-render. All right, so the other things we haven't done is we didn't put any materials on the legs, and that should probably be either paint or wood. So let's just finish up the material portion by, let's say, I'll go with wood again, and I'm going to do a contrasting wood, so something darker. Okay, let's say rose myrtle. You would not likely have that on the legs, but we can do anything we want in the virtual world. Right? All right, so I'm going to select my table legs first, so I don't accidentally drag and drop into something else. And then I'm going to right click on rose myrtle and select assign to selection. And then let's just do another render. It should be pretty dark. Not too dark. I'll take it. Okay, before we go to the last topic, I want to show you how to change the grain direction of the tabletop so that the grain pattern is in the long direction of the table. Okay, and this is a little tricky, but this isn't even actually in the topics list, but I want you to see this because there's a lot more, and if we have a couple more classes to go, I would do that. But this is formally called mapping. Right? Let's go to realistic shading so that we can see the table material. And if you look right below the material browser, you're going to see mapping material. Select this little list button here next to it. And you should be selecting the shape that best describes the surface that we're going to work with. And we're going to actually affect only the top plane of this table. We're not going to affect the sides. So that would be planar. If we were going to change the grain direction on all sides of the table, we would go with box shape. But select planar. Now, here's the trick. You have to hold down the control key, and then only the top surface will highlight, and then click the top surface. Okay, then let go of the control key and hit enter. Okay, so we selected the planar mapping, we held down the control key, and then we selected within the top surface and only that highlight. Now, what we need to do is rotate this. Think of that as the base point. If I rotate this 90 degrees, then my grain is going to go in the long direction. But I am not in the rotate mode of this mapping process. So I have to right-click with my mouse, and I can either move it, which is what I'm in now and I don't want to be, or I could rotate. So select rotate. Right? Then you get that spherical gizmo. I want to rotate this along the blue axis, which is the z-axis. So you have to put your mouse on that axis. It turns orange, and then click. And now we can see this huge rectangle, and as you move that, you can see the grain is rotating with it. And all I have to do is swing this around, right? Or I could actually, can I snap to that back corner? It doesn't matter that that plane is off in the other direction. As long as the grain of the table is the way you want it, it's okay. So I can snap to that corner, which will give me a perfect 90 degrees. And just a note, sometimes you can't snap and you have to click by eye. I was never crazy with that process, but it does the job either way. So I'm going to click that, right? And now hit escape to clear. Okay? So we were able to use the material mapping process using the planar option and rotate the grain around to another direction, making it look even more realistic. All right, so that's pretty neat. All right, I'm going to hit escape. I want you to zoom in really close to this rectangular block, and that might be a little strange. Get in as close as you can. You could see that orange peel texture now, and do a render just on that. Okay, so even though that surface is literally smooth, because that material has this textured surface to it, that will transform your smooth surface to a textured surface, which is neat. Okay, and there are a lot of materials that have that. There's diamond plate, it's called bumpy, a bumpy material. And I'll show you that. I'm going to close out of this. And if you go to, we have to find that in the editor. If you go to the coarse textured and double click on it, that's going to change this, right? So see this finish bumps? If I open that up, I can make that more or less textured, right? If I crank that up, it'll make that look even, it's like 100 grit sandpaper versus 60 grit sandpaper. The 60 grit sandpaper has a lot more coarseness to it, just by dragging the slider. So there's a lot of neat things you can do to alter the appearance of that. Okay, so I'm going to zoom back out. All right, what I want to do here is we're going to kind of abandon the camera a little bit, and I'm going to go to 3D orbit, and I'm going to go to the orbit, and I'm going to orbit around this side of the room so that I'm kind of looking out into infinity. And I'm going to lower my viewpoint. Okay? See if you can get that, which is another reason I didn't put the walls there so we could do what we're about to do. And I can even pan this over to see a little bit more of the background. Now, having a background in this scene is not really appropriate because our camera's looking to the wall and we don't see beyond it. But if you wanted to, let's say, if you had a window in the wall and you wanted to see out into the world, you could add backgrounds. You saw in my rendering I had a picture of landscaping with trees and shrubs. But if I just wanted to have an object with no walls, I don't want to be looking into the dark abyss. I want some sort of a background image. So I just had an idea here that we'll do this instead. Go back and look through the lens of your camera. Only we're going to temporarily turn off our walls. So I want you to click on the wall, right click, and select Isolate and Hide. Hide means it's like putting it in a layer and shutting the layer off. This is a common thing done in 3D. You just temporarily shut things off. So I'm going to pick Hide Objects, and the wall disappears. Okay? Now I can go to orbit and lower my viewpoint a bit so that I can see into the whole background. And do a render. Let's just see what that looks like without the back walls. See, this is what happens. You're looking into deep space, and it looks not so good. So what we're going to do is add a gradient background, which will, you'd never want to print a black background like that. It'll just soak up all your black ink, and then, you're running out of ink in one print. So what we're going to do is add a gradient background. Now, we have to do that through our camera. So, and the view manager. Okay, so the view command, the view manager, again in this toolbar, this is a popular toolbar, right? We select our views, we create cameras, we switch to our different camera views, but all the way to the left is our view manager. Okay? So select the view manager button and this dialog appears, and you might not see your camera on this list on the left, but if you click the plus sign, you'll see the camera view. All right, select the word camera, and the middle of this dialog now sets up to a lot of options here. What you want here is background where it says none. Select none, select it again, and select gradient. Okay, gradient. Now, when I select gradient, I get this light gray to a black. So from top of the screen to bottom of the screen. Let's say we want to change this to sunset in August look, where you've got a deep burnt orange going to a blue. Right? Orange at the bottom, blue at the top. Now the problem with this is our table is going to obscure most of it. Right? So we're only going to be seeing, at best, this much of it. And if I divide my screen into two, and this is orange and this is blue, I'm going to see mostly blue. So what we're going to do is divide the screen up horizontally into three colors. So I'm going to click three colors. And the bottom color we're just going to ignore. And because it's black, we might have to lighten that up a little bit. But let's select top color. And the top color is going to be this deep blue. So I'm going to click in here, this deep blue, and I'm going to just drag that down a bit. That's almost a purpley blue. I can drag this left or right. Say about like that. Okay, so it's not scientific, just get it about like that. Okay, so I'm picking OK. Now I'm going to pick inside the middle color, and I'm going to find a nice, burnt orange. Wow, that's right on. Okay, and I'm going to pick OK. Okay, so the black doesn't really kick in until you're pretty much at the bottom. So if we see evidence of that, we can then click black and brighten that up too. But I'm gonna select OK with that. Okay. Now here's an important thing. You never hit OK going out of this dialog box. You have to do it in a 3-click sequence. You're gonna select Set Current, apply, and then OK, right? In that order. 1, 2, 3. If you don't do it in that order, you'll do a render and you won't see the gradient background, right? So set current, apply, OK. Now hit render. Interesting. It almost looks like, we have to lower our viewpoint, but you can see what that did. Okay. So let's do that. I'm gonna close out the render window. I'm gonna go to orbit, and I'm just gonna lower my viewpoint. So I lowered it that way. Maybe I don't want to look too extreme at the edge of the table, and I'm gonna drag it down that way. All right. And now let's do another render. And you can just see the ceiling. We never hid the ceiling peeking into that. But kind of neat results, right? Okay, so if we look back at our topics list, pretty much covered everything here. We added 1.2 spots. The only thing we didn't see is the texture editor. We didn't really need to, and believe me, that's a good thing. I'm gonna just leave that be. But we did see the material, obviously the materials browser and the editor. The editor is what we double clicked on the material in. We double clicked on the material up in the document section, and then it opened up. We did that, let's say, course texture. It opened this up, and we were able to make adjustments. We did that on the terracotta for the glossiness and the other setting that lowered the intensity of that. Okay, so let's say I want to render to size. I get this done here. I could then save that, and then I could add my name, but I can't do that in AutoCAD. I can't add my name on a raster image. I have to bring that into a paint program or Photoshop or something, and then add text on top of that. I could then print that. Okay, so it's a nice ability to have. Another benefit of modeling in 3D. You could also 3D print in 3D. And had we been still meeting at the college, we would have done that. We would have had a different assignment, and we would have 3D printed our assignments, which is neat. I'm told that, now that you know how to model, or, at least I've introduced you to modeling, anytime you model something at the college, you're allowed to 3D print it. Okay, so keep that in mind if that helps you in the future. Okay, so the lesson is done. You're going to have an assignment, and that assignment is you're going to open up a file, and you're going to add materials and lights to that. I believe I have a camera already in there, and I put that at an angle that I liked. You don't have to keep that same angle, but what I would recommend is, move it, use that camera and just move it around if need be. Or delete it and make another camera. That's up to you, but, if you don't want to get involved in that, just make sure that you always set that camera, and render through that. All right, I'm going to explain the assignment in just a second. I have to open up the file so that you comprehend what it is. Okay, so this is your assignment that is up on Web Campus, and you have a choice of these two objects. I'm just going to zoom in closer to the pictures. So you have already drawn for you a Nintendo 3DS, and you have a drafter designer table, just the way you see it there. And those two are in the file that's also provided on Web Campus called Render Assignment 2020. And this is the file, and these are the two objects. So if I look at this from the southeast, you can see you've got the drafting table here and the Nintendo here, and they're both on surfaces if I shade them in. Okay. Now, what you are expected to do is You're going to open that file that I just showed you, decide which one you want to do, and you're going to window it in and copy it, do a clipboard copy, and paste it into your title block drawing. And that's what 2 says. Then you're going to perform a Google search on the Nintendo 3DS or just Google Drafter Designer table and see what comes up. And what I want you to do is to see what materials are typically used for those objects. And then use the AutoCAD library. If there's nothing exactly like it, just find one that's closest to it. All right, and use appropriate materials. Then you're going to add a couple of a few lights. Use the same setup, 1 point and 2 spots showing from 2 different directions. And don't forget the exposure control to brighten it up. And then do a couple of renders through the camera, get it all set up, and then that's the step 3. And then create 1 or more viewports to best show. You can actually show the camera view through the viewport. I'll show you that in a second. Make sure that your viewport is in realistic shade. Now, you can't keep the rendered version of that. I will do that when I grade it. So when I get your file, I'm just going to look through the lens of the camera and do a render. All right? But to complete this in layout space, what I want you to do, based upon your Google search, okay, is type a little sentence or 2 in layout right on top of the viewport, above it, below it, somewhere where it'll fit, a brief summary of your product. Okay? Tell me, answer the who, what, where, when questions. What is it? How much does it cost? I know the Nintendo 3DS, what year was that, out sold in the world? The drafter table, just give me some basic facts about it. Approach it this way. If somebody were looking at your drawing and they were starting to read, give them short, interesting facts. All right, so just 2 or 3 sentences, keep it short and sweet about what that product is. That's like a product design basic thing. Then you're going to save your file as Nintendo 3DS and your first and last name, or Drafter Designer Table, your first and last name. And then email that back to me. Okay? I hope that won't take long. It's not intended to take long, but I want you to just get an experience of adding materials, lights, and doing a render. Okay? You're going to have on the final exam, you're going to have to do that. So this is great training, and think of it as, studying. I did include a study sheet on the web campus, and look those things over. And you will be emailed a drawing, and then you'll have to complete the problems on that drawing and email that back to me. That's going to be your final exam. There's no theory part, Q&A, and I decided not to do that in light of the remote scenario. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the last lesson, and AutoCAD, you got to keep using it to stay good or to get good. That's it, and goodbye.